Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Greystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Greystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongreystone.com.
Alright guys, welcome to the podcast. This is episode 9 and it's going to be a special episode this week. We've got a special guest. As you know, over the last 8 episodes I've been talking very much about wealth building, personal finance, and how to kind of expand and grow your wealth to get to that financial independence. And much of growing your income can be accelerated from your business income. So many of you are thinking about starting a business, or some of you already have a business, some of you are just in a job. And if you can make that more efficient and you can kind of accelerate your income by buying time, as I've spoken about before, that's really how you can start pumping more and more into your personal income, which then grows your income, and then the whole cogs churn and the whole thing grows a lot quicker. So the whole podcast is about buying your time, about creating financial independence. And this week I caught up with a friend of mine and a mentor, Daniel Priestley. Now Daniel Priestley runs a global business called Dent. They specialize in accelerator programs for entrepreneurs and growing your business and building assets in your business, helping people to stand out in their industry, scale up, earn more money, have more fun, create more of an impact in the world. And I caught up with him today in his London home. So you're in for a treat. He's going to talk about mindset. He's going to talk about, how to get motivated. He's going to talk about wealth accumulation, wealth acceleration, all the strategies and insights that he's developed and gained over the years. And then finally, he's going to be talking about how you can actually make the most of the times we're living in. So you're in for a real treat. I'd advise you to grab a pen. This is going to be a knowledge bomb episode. Grab a pen and paper and let's hear what Dan has to say. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Dan.
Right, what a pleasure.
Great to have you on. You've done a lot of work with, you've gained thousands of insights from working with thousands of entrepreneurs over the last decade more. And you started a business at a young age. You started a business at 21, and it was one of the fastest growing businesses.
It was huge, yeah. 0 to $1 million in its first year, and then 1 to 10 million in the 3 years after that.
Wow, so that is rapid growth, right?
Yeah, it's actually, people think that would be cool, but it was actually a really hard time. It was hugely stressful and unbelievable kind of pressure and all sorts of stuff when you're growing that fast.
So what were the sort of things what have you developed in terms of mindset as an entrepreneur who's had to endure not only rapid growth, but then going back to square one when you kind of realised that it was very volatile, the business that you was running, to now running one of the most well-established businesses, global businesses? Yeah,
so, the first mindset that I have is that we live in incredibly fortunate times. Like, this is the most incredible time to be born, the most amazing time to be alive. Had you been born in any other time in history, you would have been probably a farmer or a soldier. Whatever your parents were, you probably would go in and do something very similar. There was no changing your life. There was no bettering yourself. There was no personal development. There was no accessing the world's information. There's none of that. You'd be incredibly fortunate to have a few years of education before ending up in a factory not that long ago. In fact, my grandparents, my grandmother worked in a Rolls-Royce factory producing ammunition in the World War II. Unbelievable stuff and no choice around any of that. So the first mindset is just a deep sense of gratitude just for winning the human lottery, being born in the right place at the right time. And everything else is a bonus on top of that. Like I really do genuinely I'm in awe almost every time I do a Google search and just think, I cannot believe my luck at being born at this time in history. So that's one of the mindsets that I feel I really carry with me. Another mindset that I have is that I really do believe the best of yourself and the worst of yourself are built in. So there's this whole thing about developing yourself. And I had a turning point moment when I was working with one of the top personal development speakers in the world. He's a guru, he's a multi best-selling author with dozens of books out there. And I watched him check into a Hilton hotel and lose his shit because he hadn't been acknowledged as a Hilton Platinum member and he hadn't been upgraded to the room and all this sort of stuff. He threw his toys out of the pram, and I don't know, he must have been tired, must have, whatever. But I thought to myself at the time, there are 700 people coming along to tomorrow's event. And if they saw this scene, what would they think? And it made me realize that the best of yourself and the worst of yourself are built in. Because the following day, he gave a phenomenal, profound, deep, insightful talk from stage about personal development. And then I started to realize that I was having moments. There are days where I would get lots done. There are days where I felt like I'd come up with really great ideas. I would just answer problems and answer questions fast. And then there were days I just couldn't get my brain into gear. And I realized that actually the best personal development is not developing yourself, but putting yourself in an environment that brings the best out of you and making sure that environment, maybe that's why he wanted to be upgraded. Right. But making sure that environment is actually the right environment. You're surrounded by the right people, the right ideas, the right accountability, the right resources. And when you get that environment right, then you actually naturally become the best of yourself. So they're kind of two of the key mindsets that I like to focus on.
Yeah. When you was in the fast-growing business, you were surrounded by some really high achievers.
Yeah.
What were kind of some of the principles that you learned back then into the key to kind of accelerating growth?
Yeah, so I talk about in the book Oversubscribed that I spent time with one of Australia's top financial traders, which is probably relevant to your listeners. And he was a guy who had traded a multi-billion-dollar account for the bank. He was a pioneer in technical, trading. He told great stories about, they didn't have stop losses, so he had a set of speakers and amplifier set up to let off a shotgun sound when the price hit certain things because he was sleeping.
To wake him up.
Yeah, to wake him up. So in the middle of the night, neighbours are thinking, what the hell is going on? Anyway, so he was really great. But he was big on first principles, and one of the first principles was, why do markets go up? Because there are more buyers than sellers. Why do markets come down? Because there are more sellers than buyers, and almost everything else is noise. And that lesson, now I never got really into financial trading, but that lesson, that real principle stuck with me. That if your business, if you have a little coffee shop and there are people queuing up out the door, you can charge what you like for the coffee. If you have the perfectly built coffee shop with the best people and an amazing brand and everything, but there's not enough people queuing up, you're going to lose money, and everything else is just noise. And it's an interesting principle because I use that in my business all the time, that we don't do stuff unless we feel we can get it oversubscribed. And that, today I advise different companies, and I'll give you a horror story followed by a win. A small business trying to raise capital, and they go out and they talk to this one investor who really strings them along for 6 months. They're going to put in 2 million or whatever it was, and they're right down to the signing day, and then he changes his mind, and it basically almost wipes the whole business out. They'd banked on it, they'd gotten to that point, and then that one investor changed their mind, and the business had basically run itself out of cash. And they said, well, look what you've done to us. And, oh, well, it's your problem for not having a backup type thing, right? And then another story, and that was not a fundraiser I was involved in, but it's a horror story I heard, but another story where we actually got it right, and I worked with the team to get it right, is that we wanted to raise, might have been 1.5 million, but we went out and got soft commitments for millions, over 3 million, and we basically put ourselves in a position where we were massively oversubscribed for the round. And then when we opened the round, we said, it's genuinely, it's the first 1.5 million to come in. That's who we're taking on board. And if you're not the first 1.5, we'll return your funds. And of course, within 48 hours, all the money's in.
Yeah.
So it's that oversubscribed principle. Whatever it is you want to do, don't get hung up on getting just enough. Make sure you've got more than.
Absolutely.
More than
and when you put yourself in a vulnerable position like that, you get emotionally attached to the investment in the first place, and then you're dead.
And then you're stuck. And it's funny, you can use this with hiring employees. If you want one great salesperson, go out and aim to try and hire 4, and then get it down to the best of the big bunch.
So the oversubscribed model works internally and
it works on all things. Everything. It's about soft commitments first, get it oversubscribed, and then firm down into the hard commitments. So, but that came from one of those first principles from a trader. The prices go up when you're oversubscribed.
I love that. Okay, so the podcast is really about accumulating wealth, financial independence, accelerating your own wealth, and a massive part of that. A common massive part of that is business income. Now, you've just explained the oversubscribed model. Now, to get to that stage where you can kind of dictate the oversubscribed model, you have to develop some kind of presence in the industry, and too many businesses seem to go for kind of everyone and everything. And to be oversubscribed, you really need to pick your market. Your business develops an accelerator program on a growth in business, right? Called the KPI program.
Yeah, we support growing businesses.
Yeah. So what is your strategy for accelerating that and standing out and being able to put yourself in a position for that oversubscribed model in the first place?
So businesses go through a very predictable growth phase, and the first phase is getting the concept right, making sure you've got a good concept, something that you're passionate about, people are willing to pay for, solves a real problem that people have. So that's getting the concept right. The next phase is about packaging that up as a value proposition and making sure that people are willing to pay for it, and that the marketplace, the way you've presented it to market, is valuable. 90% of all businesses stop there. So, they're selling something, people are paying for it, but they end up in what you'd call a red ocean, highly competitive, no real profit. Maybe they're making wages, very inelastic price, high, people shopping around, all of that sort of stuff is that red ocean
just
metaphor.
Tolerating,
the market just tolerating people. So the next phase is to become influential in your market, and that influential in your market is where you carve out your own market from the market. So if the classic example is Apple. People who buy an iPad very rarely go and have a look at what Samsung is doing or what Microsoft's doing. They're interested in an iPad because it fits within their Apple ecosystem, and they really could care less about the other different Android options or any of that sort of stuff. So this is what it means to kind of carve out your own market, to have your own market. The people are not shopping around, they're in your market, not the market. So for example, you might say a band like Metallica has the Metallica market, right? There are people, like for example, myself and my wife Elena, we're off to see Metallica in a couple of months when they're here. Now, I don't really go to heavy metal concerts because I'm not not necessarily a heavy metal fan anymore, but I am a Metallica fan. So I'm in the Metallica market, and when they come to town, I'll pay £150 a ticket to go see them. But it's not like I'm sitting there looking for, you wouldn't say I'm a heavy metal band watcher. So you can see there's a difference. There's this market for Metallica that's not the market for heavy metal music. And poor Elena gets dragged along to this sort of thing as well. I bought her a T-shirt and everything, and if you know Elena, like she's going to be sitting there wondering whether these people have taken a bath or something like that. But so that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to move into that place of being an influencer where people are following your journey and your story. They're part of your world and not the market at large. And to do that, the fastest way that is compatible with human psychology is to build a personal brand. We are hardwired to connect with people and faces and personas and personalities. So, if I said to most people, tell me the colors that Google uses in its logo in the order that they use them, most people are like, I don't even know what the G in Google, what color that is. Like, is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? Is it yellow? I know it's one of those colors, but I'm not quite sure which color is Google for the G. And even though they've seen that logo thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, because our brains aren't wired to think about logos and fonts and all that sort of stuff. But if I said to you, think about Barack Obama's face, right? Bang, you instantly can see, all the pictures of Barack Obama. You can hear his voice if you wanted to hear his voice.
Yep.
Your brain is totally wired to connect with personalities. So the idea here is that you want to position yourself as a key person of influence. And that helps you to very rapidly build up a business around you, and your business will grow, really powerfully. You'll also attract talent. So the thing with business is that very rapidly the business becomes not about any one individual, but it's about having a culture that can have talented people work there. And it's the key person of influence that really attracts talent. It's the opportunity to work with Branson as to why the CEO of an airline would quit and go and work at Virgin. It's the opportunity to work with Steve Jobs, which is why a Tim Cook might take that job versus a job at Intel or something like that.
Yeah. So you've got, you're very, very qualified to speak on key people of influence because you wrote the book on it.
Yeah, well, it's a big popular thing right now. Everyone's talking about personal brand and key person of influence type thing. I wrote the book 10 years ago.
Yeah. You've really developed kind of your own model around how to stand up and scale out and be the key person of influence. Just talk us through your methodology for that.
So it's really predictable stages that you have to go through to be a key person of influence. Number one is the pitch. And everything about being a key person of influence is about enrolling others into a vision. So you're enrolling them into your world. You're pitching an idea to people where they go, I hadn't thought about the world that way. So it's that ability to enroll people into your world. So pitching an idea is a cornerstone skill of great entrepreneurs. They can all do it. They're all brilliant at it, from Steve Jobs to Bill Gates. Every great entrepreneur has the ability to enroll others into their vision. So whether it be in a social circumstance, just what do you do? And it's a great answer to that question. Or a scheduled pitch where we've got a meeting, and in the meeting I'm going to talk to you about what we're up to, and you're going to go, whoa, I want to drop what I'm doing and get involved in that. Or whether it just be getting someone to quit their job and come and work at your company. So that's that pitching skill. The second one is kind of pitching but on the page, and that's publishing. So publishing a book that enrolls people, publishing blogs and articles that enroll people, because we live in a world where if you put it into text, someone in New Zealand could find that in 2 seconds flat, and you published it, a minute ago. So you've got to get your ideas into print. And then the third one is the ability to create great products. And the reason I say great products is because no one wants to buy your time, and if they do buy your time, ultimately you're bottlenecked around a very few number of opportunities. So you've got to create great products that can sell anywhere in the world, so that you have the commercial ecosystem to monetize being a key person of influence. The fourth one is to raise profile and to build profile. And when you think about profile, it can be as simple as, if I Google you, what happens? Now, I've Googled some I've Googled some people, and I've wanted to do business with them, but when I Google them, not a lot turns up. and you think to yourself, oh, okay, that means they're probably a commoditized worker. They're they're a potential solution, but they're not the solution. Whereas sometimes you Google someone and so much good stuff comes up on page 1, 2, and 3 of Google that you think, I have to work with that person. And the fifth one is partnership. So, entrepreneurship is about reverse engineering the future. It's about looking out, seeing a vision, and then piecing together all the pieces that are missing. And in many cases, most of those pieces already exist on the planet. So it's about reorganizing those pieces. So it's about structuring partnerships that get people involved. So perhaps you want to create an educational product. Someone's already created it. Just go and package it in. Maybe you want to create a product that involves technology. There's a good chance the technology already exists. Package it in. So it's that ability to structure partnerships that leverages the pieces of the puzzle that don't need to be reinvented and brings them together.
Yeah, so you're the tour guide instead of the expert.
Yeah. And if you think about someone like Branson, he's only doing those 5 Ps, right? He's pitching, he's publishing content and books, he's creating the products that Virgin will represent, he's raising his profile and Virgin's profile, and he's doing joint ventures and partnerships to make it all happen. And other than that, he's just hanging out at the island.
That's really cool. So I know you've been recently working on a new book called Doubling Speed, and you run a program called 24 Assets. Because what the reason I bring this up is because it's all good earning more money and bringing in more income, but if you're terrible with the income or you haven't built a solid foundation or a structure that enables that to continue to grow without you being there, many people fall over. I know millionaires that are stressed as hell and terrible with their own finances. And I know the 24 Assets program was built on many insights that you developed into businesses. And you're writing a book called Doubling Speed.
Yeah.
Kind of talk us around what that's about and kind of the principles of being able to double the business income.
My first books are about getting to about 50 people or about 5 million in revenue. So Entrepreneur Revolution is about getting started, getting the mindset, key person of influence, becoming that standout person, oversubscribed, running campaigns and promotions to rev the engines of the business. 24 Assets is about formalizing all the stuff that's working into assets of the business. So then at that point, you're actually playing a game called doubling. So that becomes the game. So almost if you imagine McDonald's, they get 3 or 4 restaurants and they're working, and you go, wow, we've got the formula. Like, we know the brand, we know the people, we know the marketplace, we know the types of people to hire. Like, it's like, wow, we think we've figured it out. So now you're playing a game called exponential growth, or doubling. So doubling's it's a really fascinating thing that doesn't make sense to the human brain. You're highly logical without working it out. If you started with $100,000 a year business and doubled it 12 times, where do you think you'd be? Don't work it out. Intuitively, where do you think you'd be? 12 doubles of £100,000 is 500 million a year. So a dozen doubles is literally life-changing, world-changing, not just life-changing, world-changing. If you could double something 12 times, you would actually be one of the key players in the world. If you could double something every 5 years, it would only take you 60 years to double it 12 times. And 5 years is very slow growth. The problem is people don't have patience for 60 years of doing something. We look at David Attenborough right now. The guy's in his 90s, right? And it wasn't, he's now impacting the whole world with nature documentaries. But all through the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, David Attenborough was laughed at. Why did you give up a career in the BBC to do nature documentaries that no one's going to ever watch? And now the guy's a legend. And the reason he's a legend is he's just stayed the course, and he's done the same thing over and over, and he's hammered the same message again and again and again, and he's a legend. Nike has doubled 22 times and is the biggest shoe company in the world. McDonald's has doubled 17 times, from 1 restaurant to 38,000 restaurants. So the real key here is, how do you speed up the doubling time? So how do you double faster, right? If you can get it down to, like, Facebook in its first 10 years doubled every 9 months. If you can double every 2 years, then 12 doubles is 25 years, and you go from 100 grand to $500 million. right? So this is the idea. How do you speed up doubling speed, and how do you make it consistent, that you can just do it again and again and again? So I've been studying companies that have doubled more than 10 times to try and look for the common themes. Why didn't they break? What did they have to overcome in order to be able to be the kind of company that could double more than 10 times? Companies like Rolex, companies like Lego, companies like IKEA, right? These are companies that have been able to just double and double and double and double. Tabasco sauce, right? Tabasco sauce. So today they do something like 1 million bottles a day, but it's because they hit a doubling speed. So yeah, my book is about the principles of doubling.
Okay.
Does it sound like it'll I haven't released it yet. Is it one you'll read all my books, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask.
Whatever Dan says, do, and whatever Dan writes, read.
Well, this particular book will be for people who have gotten themselves to a particular point where they're ready for doubling.
Okay.
Right. So there's this first phase, which is the first 4 books, and then after that, it's doubling. It's then you enter a new phase, which is the ability to just keep the doubling going. It's the phase that Roger Federer is with his tennis. It's like show up and be Roger Federer.
Yeah. It's the same with trading. People try to get the quick. I mean, it's terrible in trading.
Well, that's true, right? So phase 1 in trading is figuring out how the markets work, and then it's compounding. Yeah. Once you've figured it out, do you know one of the principles is about overcoming boredom? The being willing to stay focused and disciplined in the face of boredom and repetition.
Yeah. Because
a huge part of doubling is cranking the handle and doing what works.
Yeah. So if you're boring, you're consistent. And if you're consistent, you're profitable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The same as me.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same. Okay. So recently, you've been asked to talk on stage with Kiyosaki in London, which is going to be this weekend.
This weekend, yeah.
This weekend. Wow. You came from Australia. You was in Australia until you was 26, and then you came over to here. Growing up, and obviously you was part of that high growth company and all the rest of it. But growing up, what was who are your influences around money and wealth and business?
Well, there was an influential moment that happened, I think it must have been about 97, 98, and my grandfather passed away and another family friend passed away, a guy called Jim Huddleton, and they both didn't leave much behind. My grandfather had worked 40 years in one job, and he had been a factory technician, an apprentice, and he'd worked his way up to be the general manager of a factory with 400 employees. He had had shares in the company, and he had retired with over $1.5 million, which at the time had been a lot of money, and he owned his own house and all that sort of stuff. But he got involved in a scam, and he lost it all. And in 6 years, he went from a very proud man and a man who had wealth and who made money to a man who was incredibly ashamed of himself, and he didn't have the strength to even fight his emphysema, and he passed away at 66. And then the other guy who passed away was a guy called Jim. Now, Jim had actually been this crazy entrepreneur. He had started businesses. He had followed his hunches and his intuitions. He'd traveled the world. He'd done things like exported the first New Zealand merino wool suits, because he'd kind of like built the brand around merino wool. He invented the photo finish of the horse races, where he saw the technology for cameras and thought, oh, you could do a photo finish of a horse race, and he came up with the technology for that. He was involved in promoting concerts, and he was a co-promoter of the Beatles coming to Australia, and he helped fill those concerts. And he'd just done this amazing stuff in fashion and in technology at the time and in music industry. And right up to the end, he started a new venture in his late 60s, and it was this massive songwriters competition, and people from all over the world would come to the Gold Coast and do the songwriting competition. And he had really built this amazing brand, but he had had a lot of money tied up in it. And then bang, age 70, on his birthday, his 70th birthday, he was born on Christmas Day and he died on Christmas Day, and he died in his sleep. And I read his eulogy and I went, God, both of these guys died without much left behind. Both of them died roughly the same age. But Jim had this phenomenal life of interesting experiences. And my grandfather did delayed gratification. And I remember it had a bit of a profound impact on me, thinking, well, you're probably going to die with nothing anyway. You better have a good fun life. There better be some interesting chapters in there. So that was a real kind of wake up for me when I must have been about 17 at the time.
Right.
And that was a very, like a wow.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Well, just to finish off, I just want to kind of go through a quick fire round.
That's funny, by the way. It's like Rich Dad Poor Dad, isn't it? It's
I was
actually,
just thinking
I hadn't twigged that it's quite similar. Rich Grandpa, Poor Grandpa.
Yeah. There's also there's delayed gratification though, and then there's kind of living a full life and not playing the long game. So there's kind of a sweet spot that you need to. Yeah,
you've got to find that. Yeah, you've got to. Delayed gratification, but taking some risks, but recognizing that we get one life, we get one shot at it. Take some risks, go and pursue some dreams.
Yeah, I think people get held back by risk. Everything's a risk.
Yeah,
getting your car's a risk.
Yeah, and it all ends badly anyway.
All right, so just to go into the end of the podcast, just a quick fire round then. Your best piece of advice for developing a wealth mindset.
You get what you pitch for, and you're always pitching. So don't expect someone to send you the letter. Get out there and pitch for it.
Excellent. What would be your top tip for accumulation of wealth?
Develop assets, and in particular, digital assets are the most undervalued asset class at the moment. So residual income comes from residual value. And when you create a digital asset, it is something that you create once that can be replicated perfectly over time and distance and doesn't lose any quality over 10, 20, 30 years. So create things and put them online that are going to be still valuable in 10 years' time.
With leverage, right?
It's massive leverage across space and time. So digital assets for me are a massive, people don't think of them as an asset class. I really think of, if you were to buy a house, maybe a 2 to 3% yield would be the acceptable, rental yield. If you were to create a really good video on YouTube, it might cost you $2 or $3 and it might generate 20 to 30 grand a year.
Yeah.
So get into digital assets. Yeah. It's an undervalued asset class.
Preaching to the converted here. Okay, number 3, what would be your top tip for acceleration?
Stand out, become a key person of influence. All the money moves to key people of influence.
100% agree. And what is your top tip for kind of motivating people to get it done, actually get stuff done?
Environment dictates performance. So motivation is a factor of being in the right environment. The right environment is made up of good quality best practices, accountability, peer group and mentors, and the right resources. We're not inherently built to be motivated. People who are highly motivated in our ancestors' times probably died. If you as a hunter-gatherer, if you got up and went for a run, you probably got eaten. So sitting in the shade and waiting for the berries to grow was probably a good strategy. So we're not built for motivation. We're built for acting when the conditions are right. So put yourself around people and ideas that give you the right conditions more often.
Cool. And one thing that you've always said is prolific beats perfect.
Prolific beats perfect. Just that's a great thing. Perfectionism is just protectionism. You're just trying to play it safe. Get it out in the marketplace. All the people you respect and admire are prolific more than they're perfect. The Beatles wrote and released a song on average every 12.4 days for 8 years.
Yeah, that's prolific.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, Dan, thank you very much for coming on. Just before we head off, I just want to ask you one more question, and that is, what is your big goal?
My big goal, the thing that gets me up in the morning every day, would be one day I will have a lake full of custard. I'll have a special boat that runs on custard that goes through it, and you just be able to jump off and have a swim in the lake full of custard. You have unlimited rice pudding and
vanilla.
Yeah, you know what it's like. So my big vision, my big why is I want to connect thousands of entrepreneurs to the United Nations Global Goals. So we have a framework for changing the world. We have a framework for creating a world that works for everyone. It's called the United Nations Global Goals. It's been well thought through and documented. It's the best framework that exists on the planet. So what I want businesses and entrepreneurs that as they grow and scale, they actually halve a problem. So as they double the business, they halve a problem on the planet. And that's my vision. I want to see businesses, I want to see coffee shops that are actually solving water crises, and I want to see fashion businesses that are actually removing chemicals from the rivers, and I want to see companies that sell stuff that actually lifts plastic out of the ocean. I want to find ways to get the entrepreneurial mindset, that expansive mindset, to focus on solving the big, meaningful problems on the planet, and a lake full of custard.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Dan. Well, thanks for your time, and thanks for coming on the podcast. And if you want to reach out to Dan or check out any of his work, Daniel Priestley, where can they find you?
All the usual places, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and all that sort of stuff. They can email the office, info@dent.global, and we'll invite them to an event. Amazon for the books, take the scorecard, Key Person of Influence scorecard.
I'll put all the links in the description, and if you Google him, it should be on the first 3 pages of Google.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Cheers.
Well. So hopefully you got a lot from that episode. Lots and lots of nuggets there from Dan. Great guy. He was talking about mindset, accumulation of wealth and growth, and doubling speed, how you can use leveraged income and double your growth as a business, or even if you're in a job, how you can create assets to make your job more efficient and benefit from leveraged income. And then he was talking about exponential growth and compounding, really what I preach about all the time, playing that long game to benefit from that exponential growth, showing up every day. And finally, just really making the most of the amazing time that we're living in right now. There is no need to follow someone else's footsteps or be on someone else's agenda. You want to be able to design your life and be who you want to be, and right now is the best time. We have an abundance of opportunity to make that happen. You have the world at your fingertips, so hopefully you got something from that. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great rest of your week and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongreystone.com.